Today's AskReddit post. Those who knew someone who went missing. What happened? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. My cousin, who I barely knew, disappeared along with his car, leaving behind a large bloodstain in his apartment. Right from the start his roommates were suspects, but several years passed, and his body was still missing. The case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries or America's Most Wanted, or one of those, and a tip came in giving the location of his car in a nearby river. His body was found in the trunk, and the roommates confessed and went to prison. Do you know why they did it? I believe it was a lover's quarrel. A family friend went to a Metallica concert. During intermission she went out to have a cigarette and the venue wouldn't let her back in. There's footage of her walking through the parking lot and then she wasn't seen again. They ended up finding her body a year or so later and through DNA connected it to another rape/murder. Because of that DNA they found the guy who did it. It was awful. Morgan was her name, and she was beautiful and talented, and had her whole life ahead of her. I heard about this when they finally caught the murderer through the Hannah Graham murder. Really sad. A friend went missing one night in June 2016 after a night out. He had an argument with his and wandered off on foot. Days went by, and there was no info. Find out, he'd somehow been hit by a car and died. He didn't have his wallet on him, so it took a bit for them to identify his body. No one understood how his significant other wasn't with him, or what led up to him walking off in what I think was a drunken state. My girlfriend, who has been sober for almost a year, relapsed last night and started a fight with me. She walked off into the woods around our Airbnb wearing sandals and one of those short-sleeved/short-legged summer rompers. It took about an hour and a half, but my friends and I found her and coaxed her out, and then had to convince her to walk on the roadside and not through some stranger's yard. She was bleeding in like 6 different places from her hike and had lost everything but her phone, which was dead. We're in a completely new to us place for the weekend, and I'm terrified at how close we came to just never seeing her again. I went to the same elementary school as Michael Luna. He was kidnapped off the playground and still not found to this day. I remember after it happened every parent showed up to walk the entire school of kids home. I also remember running ahead of the pack for whatever reason and all the parents were screaming at me to get back. They were terrified. Growing up in Vancouver, the story of Michael Luna's disappearance, the posters everywhere, etc. gave me an intense paranoia about kidnapping when I was a kid. It was by far my biggest fear. It was the Heather Thomas case for me. Guy I went to school with and kind of grew up around. His mom is one of my mom's best friends. Went missing in 2010 on his way home. Police and search parties searched everywhere looking for him and his truck. He had to pass over a bridge to get to his house. So it should be noted that the lakes were searched by divers and dragging the lake as well. 4 years later, 2014, the water levels were very low and someone called in saying they saw a tire sticking out of the surface of the water near the bridge he would have had to cross to get home. It was him and his truck. At least the family got some closure after the long, excruciating years. Are you saying that they had searched the area of that bridge when he went missing? If they did, how did they not find the whole truck? Was the water really deep at the time? Not me, but a poor old guy at Costco. This old guy, maybe late 60s, came up to me and said, "Jimmy, I think that's the name," he said. "Is that you?" I said no. His face sank. I talked to him for a bit. Apparently his adult grandson Jimmy vanished a few years before, and I looked just like him. He said the family had no idea where he is and hadn't seen him in years. He just up and moved away without telling anyone. The guy didn't seem like he had dementia or anything. Just a grandfather looking for his grandson. This was a few years ago. I felt really bad for the guy. His heart probably got super excited only to be broken again when I wasn't Jimmy. I hope Jimmy eventually contacted his family because his grandfather seemed really sad about it. Makes me wonder how often the old man made that mistake. He was probably scanning every face he saw in hopes of finding his grandson. My great-grandfather disappeared when his youngest child, my grandfather, was a toddler. Records were finally found, decades later, showing he had moved across the county, changed his name, remarried, and had additional kids. I really don't understand why some people do that. Easier to disappear, I guess. A friend from high school. She was skiing and got separated from her party during the day. Sadly, she was found deceased in a tree well. She died at 19. I still think of her often. She was such a bright light and had an amazing future. I love skiing, but ever since I discovered what tree wells are, I'm terrified of it. Skiing in general is pretty scary, ever since I saw a rogue ski flying down the mountain and hit my brother. Thank God he had those plastic boots on, in the ankle. It could have been so much worse. A childhood family friend had a head injury from a BMX accident and was most likely suffering from concussion or post-concussion symptoms. Went off into the wilderness, and his remains were found 3 years later. His dad spearheaded the search effort during those years. I think overall not knowing exactly what happened was hard, but finding his remains and getting to bring them home was really great closure. Sorry to hear about your friend. Your story really reminded me the case of Brian Histand. My brother's middle school teacher. He just didn't show up to school one day, which was very unusual. The school scrambled to find a substitute for him because they had no notice. We had a whole school meeting like 2 days later when he was officially missing, where they told us all about it. He left the house that morning as usual. According to his wife later said, he was never seen again. Many search parties were organized, and people looked for months, but they never found him. He is still officially missing today. Something similar happened to one of the high school teachers we had, except it was the husband of one of the teachers who taught at another school. He went for his usual jog quarter into the winter, but never came home. Was missing for months until the end of the winter, where they found a body by the lake. Apparently he slipped, hit his head, and fell into the water. Edit, to add. The wife received a call that they found her husband while she was teaching at school. It was heartbreaking. My cousin was in a horrible car accident and the hospital miscommunicated with the police and his name was given incorrectly. He was missing for a week. Oh my god. Something similar happened to family friends of ours. Their sister had mental health issues and drug addictions. She went missing, and the police couldn't find her. Turns out she mouthed off to a bunch of gangsters, and they beat her within an inch of her life. She lived a few more months, but had a lot of brain damage. She died a few months after the attack. Those gangsters sound like a real bunch of ducking cowards to gang up on and brutally beat a mentally ill, drug addicted woman. What a bunch of pussies. Debbie Moberg, age 16. The first story was that she ran away, but the stepdad couldn't keep his story straight. 2 days later they talked to her 7-year-old sister, who reported the stepdad carrying her out of the house, wrapped in a blanket. He actually took the little sister with to dump the body. It took 3 months of jail before he confessed to murdering her. He had been molesting her for years. She stood up to him when he shifted to the little sister. He had put her body in a commercial dumpster, which in turn was emptied at the city landfill. Landfill personnel did spend several weeks combing the area. They actually keep records of where things are dumped when, but no luck. So her last place is sort of known, but her body never properly found. Man, her little sister both severely traumatized and a hero. This was my friend's brother. He disappeared and his apartment had blood everywhere, as if from a struggle or suicide attempt. Years later he showed up on his brother's doorstep and said he had been off living as a shaman somewhere. Who knows how accurate that is? Man. Unrelated, but that reminds me of the crazy dreams I have of my late sister not being dead anymore. She always shows up, just like that, telling me everything is fine and she's back. She just ran away. I never have read about it happening in real life. I can imagine it would be bizarre though. Around July of 2022, an old high school classmate of mine went missing. She was a mother of 2 boys. One of them was special needs. The last known contact she had with anyone was when she told a friend of hers she was going to the store, but she never returned. The police were informed, and a missing persons report was filed. Her phone and wallet were found at her home. A boyfriend she was dating was questioned and released without any indication of foul play. She's never been seen or heard from since. My town is small, in the mountains of the Appalachian Mountains. For some context, everyone knows everyone, so when someone goes missing you notice. First was a lady that friends with my mom. Let's call her M. She owned and operated a sandwich shop. My mom was working for her and helping her out at the time. One day she just didn't come to work. Her husband showed up instead. Day 2, she didn't show up. She wasn't answering calls and her husband was telling everyone she left town suddenly, ran away. My mom didn't believe him and reported her missing. 2 or 3 days later her body was found in a well at their camp residence. Her husband killed her and hid her body in the well because he was caught having an affair. He's in prison for the rest of his life. Second person is basically the same thing, only she was never found. Her boyfriend is the #1 suspect, but her body has never been found, and he's still walking the streets. I was 8 and she was 2. The town searched for her for like 2 weeks, finding nothing. The mother of the son, 14 years old, who killed her and helped in the search, called the cops about a strange smell coming from his room. They found her in edits under his waterbed mattress. Her grave is right next to my grandfather's. So also an often reminder. Maddie Clifton, rest in peace. I know this case. I can't even imagine. A neighbor's son vanished while jogging in our neighborhood. He was an avid runner, and it was unlike him to not come back on time. Days turned into a frantic search involving the entire community. Unfortunately, his body was found in a nearby river. An investigation revealed he had been struck by a hit-and-run driver and his body was dumped to hide the crime. The perpetrator was eventually caught, but it was a devastating loss for his family. As someone who used to run in back roads, this is extremely sad. Men normally have the comfort of knowing I'll be safe, due to us normally not being usual victims for kidnappings or rape. Also due to us being fast and strong, especially if you're an athlete. Can't imagine how sad that is to just be hit by a car and have the sob who hit you just dump your body in a lake. Feel terrible for the family. Can't imagine that type of worry, fear and pain. He ended up on the other side of the country, started a new life, and died 30 years later. He had schizophrenia. The family didn't know where he was all those years. This is what I fear for my brother. He was a good, kind man. We went through the illnesses of both of our parents at the same time. Our mother shocked us all by dying, and my father survived. My brother lost it, and within a week he was no longer who he was. It ended with him assaulting me and being arrested. I don't blame him. I know that was not him. He was unfortunately found guilty and was sentenced to probation, I think. We have not seen him since he left. My father died. The rest of my father's siblings have died. Our cousin was murdered. But what I hope he comes back to find is my niece. I tell her all the time that her uncle would have loved nothing more than to bug her. I just fear one day I'm going to get a knock on the door. My cousin was kidnapped on her way to school. It was over 20 years ago and she's not been found. That's horrible. I'm so sorry. They went on a wilderness hiking trip alone in Hawaii. They never came home. No body was ever found. As it turns out, this has happened in Hawaii to quite a few people over the years. I guess it is a more dangerous region than people generally understand. Kalaloa Trail. I lived in Kauai and hiked it. It's one of the most dangerous hikes in the world. The beach at the trailhead has a marker with all the people that tried to swim there, highly advised against roughly 3/4 of the year, and were just never seen again. A friend of mine's sister went missing in the early 80s. We always suspected she was a victim of Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. We found out a couple of years ago that she is in fact on his list of suspected victims. That's harrowing. I'm sorry. When I was a kid, a friend of mine was kidnapped by his dad. The mom got custody and the dad just showed up one day and took him. It was devastating for everyone. Especially the mom and brother. Yeah right EKY he only took one kid. After about 5 years of police investigations and the mom having to change her legal name and go into hiding, they finally found him and got him back home. He was safe, but he was really quiet for a few years after he got back. I have no idea what happened during that time. What I do know is that he seems incredibly well adjusted now, and last I heard he's happily married. My nephew was born when his parents were 16. His father is Greek. Once they found out that the baby was a boy and they saw that he was the spitting image of his father, suddenly they wanted him. One day my cousin and I were watching him play in his kiddie pool, and I told my cousin I'm gonna go get a drink. I was inside and heard her scream for me. I run back outside and my cousin is holding the baby. The family had tried to take him. When the police caught up with them, they said they just wanted to hold him. Yeah okay. Turns out the parents had bought tickets to Greece. Guy in my town went missing. Older gentleman. His family said he took off walking with a gun. They found him just under a year later by some railroad tracks with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The family suffered that whole time. About 8 years ago was at a bar with my university roommate around midnight. A guy I don't recognize comes up to my roommate. They exchange some words and give each other a big hug. Turns out they were old childhood friends. He sticks around and we shoot the poop for an hour or so. Super nice dude. Said he had to go meet some people, but if we are still out he might come back this way. We stay for a couple more hours. He never comes back and we head home. Around 2 weeks later my roommate finds out via Facebook he went missing that night and they found his body dumped in a storm drain a few days later. It's still kind of surreal typing this out, now that we were maybe some of the last people he talked to. They did catch the people that did it though, so that was good at least. Edit. Whoa this blew up. Unfortunately I didn't learn what happened specifically. Whether it was a drug deal gone bad, or he odd with some other people and they panicked and dumped him. But my roommate later told me that they caught the people that dumped the body in the storm drain. When my cousin and her husband and kids went on a vacation to Curaçao, around 35°C that time of year, a few years ago, the area is covered in thick jungle, and it was made clear to everyone who went there that you ********** or was required to stay on the paths. He decided to go for an evening stroll while the rest stayed at their cabin. Took a 1-liter bottle of water and his phone with him. Nearly no reception as soon as you walked into the bush. Some gum and went off path anyway because he probably got curious. Close bracket. Search and rescue were busy doing their searches along with volunteers around a large area, and he was found 5 days after he went missing about 2 kilometers from where he went off path. He died from a heat-induced heart attack, but was probably already completely unconscious before that happened due to dehydration. He was 47. Goes to show you, when you are told not to go off path, because people tend to get easily lost in thick jungle, do not go off path. It might actually kill you. One of my best friends from childhood, her boyfriend and his friend set fire to her parents' house one night with her parents tied up inside. Luckily, they escaped, but she wound up missing for weeks. So many people were slinging accusations that she was in on it, but I, and others who really knew her, knew it just wasn't possible. I feared for the worst, but hoped for the best. Eventually they found her body in the woods. Her boyfriend had shot her point blank with a shotgun before he and his friend went to her parents' house. I'm still not clear on the entire motivation. I know he was an addict and her parents were trying to get her away from him. She was not an addict and they didn't want her going down that path. And I know he had previously been abusive. But I have no idea, still, what the final motivating factor was for him to do this. He and his friend are now in prison, and I hope they never see the light of day again. I was a 911 telecommunicator in moderately well-off, very low-crime county. I took the 911 call for a 16-year-old girl that went missing after she didn't come home from her morning run. About 9 hours later, I took a 911 call from the opposite side of the county. Guy claims girl ran up to him claiming she had been kidnapped by a guy in a white box truck. She described him as a middle-aged white guy, and in his truck he was making her dress up in wedding dresses to take pictures of her. He didn't physically assault her in any way. Aside from the initial kidnapping, no rape, no violence. She claims he didn't even watch her change. Just wedding dress pictures. I have no idea if he was ever caught. Edit. Spelling error. I meant other side of county, not country. Sorry about that. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.